Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. In today's episode, I speak to returning guest photographer Jeff Vallee. I figured I'd give Jeff a call. He's currently out in Korea, working on a job out there. And prior to the shoot, they had to do a 14-day quarantine. So he's just been kind of holed up in his hotel for the next 14 days. So I figured give him a shout and see how he's doing and see what he's kind of been working on and everything that's kind of going on in his world. So kind of this interview is kind of talk about what he's been working on and different photography projects, as well as a new mentorship program he's been working on with his agent, Apostrophe Reps. They started a new mentorship program for emerging Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So anybody interested in pursuing a career in commercial photography, they got a whole new mentorship program set up. You can go to apostrophereps.com or reach out to Jeff Vallee. I'll put all the links in the descriptions, and if you got any questions, feel free to reach out to him. Jeff's someone I kind of just met through doing the podcast, and we've stayed in contact, and he's just a really hardworking photographer and always has a good outlook on things and is real positive. So I was really excited to kind of talk to him again and see what's been going on in his world. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and thanks so much for listening. All right, and now welcome back, Jeff Vallee, former guest on the Photo Banter. Interested to talk to you, Jeff. Jeff is currently in, or you can tell us, where are you at right now, Jeff?
Right now I'm in Seoul in Korea.
And you've been, I think, so you're out there for a job, and before you guys shoot, you have to do a 14-day quarantine. So I think, what are you on, day 10 or 11, just stuck in your hotel room?
I'm on day 9. For the first handful of days, I was very aware of what day it was, and then it started to kind of blend together a little bit. And so now I'm past the halfway point. So yeah, anybody who enters from what I understand, anybody who enters Korea, either if you're a resident, you can quarantine at home, but if you're not, then you go to one of these government hotels, and they do this long process. They're extremely thorough, so it's actually really a good peace of mind coming here, knowing that you're going to be safe, and that if for some reason you picked up something while you traveled, that you're not going to infect anyone else.
Yeah, I think you're the first person I've known that has traveled out of the country so far for a job. I don't know too many people that have been really traveling doing productions, I guess, yet, But
yeah, I mean, I see people traveling in the US.
Yep.
And most, I mean, I guess maybe most people, you kind of waffle back and forth between what you think is safe and what you read about, and you kind of try to parse all the information and make a decision for yourself.
Yep.
From what I understand, traveling on a plane does not seem to be a very high risk thing if you're really careful.
Yep.
The filters that they have on planes are really effective, and so you're more likely to have risky situations in the airport than on the plane. So yeah, I just took it really seriously, and wore a mask from when I left my house in an Uber until when I got into my room a long time later.
Yeah. And for putting this production together, is there anything you kind of had to switch up just in terms of producing this job, in terms of crew or things like that? How are you just hiring kind of local assistants, or is it this more of kind of just a solo thing, or how are you guys approaching this shooting this production, I guess?
So not to sound too elusive or a cool guy, but so it's an NDA job, so
Got it.
we can't really say a whole lot about it. But as far as our end,
Yep.
It's probably the first job that I've ever worked on where I was only allowed to take one assistant and the rest will be locals.
Yeah.
So in this type of a scenario, you got to kind of decide whether you what makes you feel the most comfortable, and what makes you feel that, would you rather bring your favorite digital tech, or would you rather bring your favorite person to help you light?
Yeah.
And just depending on the job, right? And the kind of stress endured, or is the job really lighting heavy, or is it really just you need someone to help you be your right hand person and be your grunt, or maybe just your emotional support.
Yeah.
So for this particular one, I brought a gaffer with me because I really want to lean hard onto putting some pretty particular light in place.
That's cool, man. I guess otherwise, how you been doing, man? Like obviously a crazy year. Have you been shooting much up to this point, or is this kind of your first big production since everything kind of went haywire?
We've worked on a few larger things. It basically was like total like dial tone until August.
Yeah.
I think we have like, so like end of March, like right before the shutdown, we like submitted this like really in-depth treatment to work on like a really awesome job to launch a very well-known,
Yep.
product for a company. And then it just was crickets. And I was just like, oh, well, we'll definitely be working in like May. And then I'm like, if we're not working in May, then like June, we're going to be like really going for it.
Yeah.
And then reality just sets in and we all just kind of like, and then in that particular, it's so funny to try to think back like what March and April were like, because it seems like a
Forever
lifetime
ago.
ago, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, it's a interesting
But
time.
I was like, back then I think I was like fantasizing about like, cool, I'm just gonna get in a motorhome with my wife and my kid, and I'm gonna go like roam the earth like Kane and Kung Fu, and then realizing that that doesn't make any sense either. And
No.
that's not really like a responsible thing to do. And everywhere you travel is not going to be open anyway.
Yep.
But I think once we got kind of like all of those like fantasies out of the way, that it was just going to be locked down and kind of boring and a little bit repetitive, then we just kind of waited it out and then moved to California in the beginning of July. So that was a really big change for me, and then that took up a lot of our time to just like settle in and find a place to live and things like that.
Mm.
I want to
Yeah, I
make
was gonna.
sure, am I internet?
Yeah, it's just like freezing a little bit, but it's all right.
I switched to a faster internet.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, it's expected. We're across the world, so a little freezing it will happen. But yeah, man, I was gonna ask you that. I noticed you moved across the country. What kind of made you want to make the jump? I know you're in New York for a while, and like, how's it kind of been? Like, 'cause that's one thing I always worry about. Like, as a photographer, I think about moving sometimes, but then it's like, does it feel like you're starting from scratch, like finding new clients, like in your area, or what's kind of made you want to make the jump?
I wanted to make the jump because I was kind of done with New York.
Yeah.
Not from a photography standpoint, just like my nerves.
Yeah.
It's like I love New York. I mean, it's one of the most exciting and kind of vibrant and inspiring places you can live on earth.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, I would travel to California and I would surf and I would do things like that, and then I would come back to New York and I would just like be kind of agitated and a little bit grumpy for a couple days.
Yeah.
And then when I had a kid, I was just like, all right, I'm fucking done.
Yeah.
Immediately you become like an older version of yourself, like almost comically kind of like ironically lame, where you're just like, God, everything's so loud, and people are like waking up your baby, and like people are like laying on their horn like right when you're walking by with a stroller, and you're just like, God, I feel like I'm just surrounded by chaos.
Yeah. I don't know how
But the
people.
reason why we stayed
Yeah. Say no. Keep saying.
the reason why we stayed is my wife had to finish up a PhD, and so as soon as that was finished, then we hightailed it out of there.
Yeah, man, New York's an amazing place. I like going there, but I've never like I even when I go to visit there, like I have a hard time taking pictures there just because it's just like so much chaos and like I feel like there's obviously so many amazing photographers there and there's like the history of like street photography and just everything. But I feel lost in those environments. That's why I live out in the burbs, man. I feel like I can breathe, I can kind of think, I can kind of get from point A to point B a little easier. It's just kind of a different way of thinking, but yeah, it's interesting in New York.
The one thing that I love about New York is the people just don't give a shit whether you're shooting or not. And like you go to LA, okay, so you know how like I mean, again, I'll state it a million times. I'm not an actual skateboarder, but I kind of grew up around that many people that did. So I kind of, well, just like the kind of childhood we had, it was like you just kind of got away with whatever you could get away with, right? Like you're always trying to like just
Mhm.
not get caught.
Yep.
And maybe that's a lot of people's childhood. So that kind of ends up translating into photography, and you're just like, wait, to shoot, we have to like
Get a
get a
permit.
permit or ask permission and blah blah. And you're just like, fuck that. Let's just go shoot and see what happens. So like all the testing you do is all like, no permits, small teams, blah blah blah, no asking for permission, like ask for forgiveness later. And then you go and do something in LA and they're like, oh, we got to do this permit and you can't shoot over here and everything has to be like safe. And
Yeah.
you're like, you're shooting like a skateboarder and like a commercial project, and they're like, oh, that's actually a dangerous activity and we don't know whether we can do that on the shoot. And you're just like, are you fucking kidding me, man? Like, we're ruining all the spontaneity.
Yeah.
So then you end up being that New Yorker that's in California going, well, in New York, we don't have to ask for any of this. We can just do whatever we want. So
Yeah.
that is a part about New York that I really love, is that as long as you don't have a tripod on the ground, nobody gives a shit what you're doing.
Yeah. And
Walking in the middle of the street, shooting people in the middle of 10th Avenue,
yep.
shooting out of I worked on a video project where we just opened the back of a minivan and shot out of the back of the minivan with me holding a light source and my DP holding the camera.
Yeah.
And maybe we just got lucky, but I just don't think people care as much because they have like bigger fish to fry.
No, definitely. And one thing, like with the type of work you do, because you're shooting like large scale advertising and lifestyle stuff, and obviously, looking at some of the stuff you do, it looks like it's just like you guys are out there just doing whatever, but all those shots are like pre-planned a lot of times on these campaigns. Like, do you ever feel like confined by like the shot list or whatever? Because like at the end of the day, you can plan as much as you want, but when you show up on that shoot day, stuff can kind of switch up. Like, how do you kind of make sure you get the best out of those, like, I guess, advertising campaign shoots?
We've done a couple in the past, to like go off of your first question, like how have things been?
Yeah.
So like it was kind of cool. Like I shot something kind of like small that kind of folded me back into like my first day on set, kind of figure out how like you act and how other people act on set when you've been COVID tested and you have masks and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
But then we moved into like two of the larger projects I've ever worked on, where one of the main hurdles was to try to really figure out how to accomplish the shot list in the amount of days that we're shooting.
Yeah.
So it required like some really pretty intense like matrix and Tetris types things, and like shooting, where talents are going to be. And we really approached it from like a film standpoint of creating, we had one of my favorite things to do is to work on a set with an assistant director.
Yeah.
So that they can really be in charge of the shot list and I can just kind of follow their lead. I mean, we go over the shot list prior to the shoot and we try to make it work. But to answer your question is like, a lot of things require us to just kind of really zone in on the shot and kind of brainstorm about how I'm going to get something that I feel like is like free enough.
Yeah.
Within the confines of that particular shot. It's like, okay, we are shooting in living room. We're shooting, this personality with this product in this spot. And then once we're kind of in that spot, I go in and we kind of just like dirty it up a little bit and like loosen it up and then, go and get that vibe that we're looking for. But it all happens within like a pretty detailed shot list to make sure that happens. I learned that a couple years ago, that where I used to just show up to shoots and I'm like, cool, this is the shot list and I'm just going to work as fast as possible. And you tell me where I'm at. And at lunch, we'll gauge where we're at in the shot list.
Yeah.
And we'll always say, oh, we're a little bit behind. And then we always try to catch up on the back end of the day. And then I started working with producers that like were like from 12:15 to 12:45, we're shooting shot 6 with this talent. And I'm like, yes, that's how we should do it.
Oh, you like it that way? It's just more structured. Yeah.
Well, I like it because it covers our ass and makes sure that we aren't getting in some sort of dreamy state where we're off like romanticizing about this picture we're taking and we're not leaving enough time for, shots, 9, 7 and 10 that are slotted into the second part of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And I was supposed to have a special guest host with me, Jesse Burke, but unfortunately,
I knew you were gonna try to get him.
He's texting me right now. It keeps flying off. We had crazy storms here today, and he lost power, so he can't log in. But he gave me a question to ask you. He wanted to know, since the birth of your son, has it changed the way you approach photography? Have you been photographing him a lot? And I guess also, do you think you would ever like incorporate photos of your son the way like a lot of photographers do with their family and things like that?
Yeah, okay, so like concrete stuff. So over the years I've always tried to figure out if there's a camera that's for me that's like my version of a point and shoot.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so I have like a 5D, or like I use like a 1DX Mark II for my commercial work.
Yeah.
And years ago I bought like this small little Canon, and I was like, cool, like someone told me this camera's great, and I was like, it's so small, it doesn't like feel like what I used to make pictures.
Yeah.
And I think I tried a couple of them, and I would like rent cameras for vacation. That ended up being kind of like a process of mine, where I'd go to lensrentals.com and I would like rent a camera and take it on vacation and see if I liked it.
Yeah.
And then I found this one that I love, and it sounds kind of like rudimentary, but I need to hold a camera up to my eye, because that's just like how I like find pictures.
Yeah.
And so I got this little camera with a super flat small lens that I could like have underneath my winter coat in New York. And it had a little like it had a little add-on viewfinder, and the image quality was like good enough. It's never going to be as good as like the bigger cameras. And I was like, cool. And I got that camera so that I would take a camera around with me and photograph my son, because I've never been a person who really photographs my own life.
Me neither.
In fact, I think that's like a real delineation between different types of photographers. Like some people photograph everything around them. And then I'm more the person who's like, oh, well, I like my camera stays in my case until like I like set up a project or involve myself in a project.
Yep.
And so that was the first time I'd ever really kind of like shot my own life. And I started to do, like, it wasn't even a project, but I would take my son on so many walks, like, 2 or 3 times a day. I started photographing Williamsburg in Brooklyn, because I knew that I was on my way out, and I wanted to photograph the neighborhood where we lived and where my son was born.
You think that is that like a habit you want to keep going, just kind of photographing your day to day? Like, have you even been like, obviously you're stuck in a hotel room, but who knows? Maybe there's some pictures to be had in that hotel room when you're wasting your time. You think, is there like a benefit you think just to kind of this shooting day to day stuff, even if it's just random, whatever?
I think there's a benefit to like teaching I mean, it depends on what type of photographer you are. Like I have friends who shoot the living shit out of their life. I can't imagine it. They must have like a professional grade camera on them 24/7.
Yep.
I don't think I'll ever be the person who shoots my life so much that I miss out on my life because my face is on a camera. But yeah, sorry. The question was, does it
Yeah, do you think you'll just keep kind of keeping that habit going, just kind of shooting more day-to-day stuff? Because like even myself, because I'm the same way, man. Like everything's like project based, and it's stuff I'm like thinking out and like setting up. But even it's over this Thanksgiving, I made a point just to kind of photograph my family, like cutting the turkey and hanging out and helping out with dishes and stuff. Because it's like, yeah, I mean, not that I'm trying to use that for my portfolio or anything. I'm not going to put it up anywhere, but I think I want to have, because I know in like 10, 15, 20 years, I want to be able to look at those pictures.
Isn't it crazy that, so there's a similarity between you and I in that, right? Like we shoot projects. Like I look at your work and it's like, okay, I know Alex went to Cuba.
Yep.
This is about this. I know this is like a project, a portrait he shot of like an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever you get your camera out to photograph your own life, you never go, oh, that was a waste of time. You always, even if it's just like one picture, you're like, oh, that's kind of a sick picture. That's cool.
Yeah.
And like, it just like, I really love color grading imagery. So it's just like, I get excited. I go, this is going to sound so stupid, but like on the back of my iMac Pro,
yeah,
I never even considered it, but there's a card slot on the back of the computer.
Yep.
And the camera that I bought, the little one, fits those little SD cards.
Yep.
And so like I pull the card out of the camera and I plug it right into the back of the computer. All these years I'm always like, oh, you got to get the card reader and the blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, fuck, I love this process. It's so simple. Like the camera sits right on a shelf above the computer. I pull out the card, I plug it in, and then I would go through and make my selects, and then I would add color to them.
Yeah.
And that's like part of my fun, is like picking selects and being reminded that even if you get a camera out to shoot something as benign as cutting the turkey, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I actually really like that picture. And since I shoot lifestyle for a living, I should actually be doing that a lot more to like, I would love to have more opportunities to kind of fit really normal looking imagery into advertising.
Definitely.
So it's not, I mean, that's the main goal of almost all my shoots, is to get imagery that looks very relatable and doesn't look commercial.
Yeah.
And so if you practice while shooting your family at Thanksgiving or whatever, you kind of like make mental notes on how you can make those pictures on a commercial shoot. So I have slowed down in shooting with that camera,
Mm-hmm.
just because I have like a super short attention span. And so like, I'm always just like, okay, cool. Like what else is going on? And then my new life in California didn't have the same, like California is amazing, but you don't walk around your neighborhood and go, oh, these buildings are so amazing. Like
Yeah.
there's, there's not very much of that at all. Where Williamsburg, I'm just like, oh, I love this gritty ass, like kind of fucked up building, and like I know that there's probably like a really cool apartment in there and things like that. And in California, you're just like, it's just, I mean, there's cool craftsman homes that
Yeah.
I may eventually like shoot pictures of, but there's like I have to refigure it out, and I have to like find what my next little thing is that I'm gonna take pictures of.
And like during this whole like pandemic and everything, like because I know myself, I kind of been struggling, like just because I usually have a lot of personal projects going on, but since I mostly photograph portraits, I really haven't been. I've been doing my assignment work and client work that comes in, but other than that, I haven't been like actively like setting up portrait shoots on my own. I guess like how have you kind of been approaching this pandemic? Have you still been shooting personal work, or do you kind of have any like creative ruts or anything like that?
So right before the pandemic started, I was like, okay, I'm like, my son is going to go to daycare part time, because what I didn't kind of tell everyone is like I was the full-time caregiver for my son
Yep.
2 months after he was born,
Yep.
because my wife started her internship, which was at the end of her PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really challenging time for me. And like, I wish more people actually talked about this, but like taking care of your first kid
Yeah.
is one of the hardest jobs you'll ever do. It like just turns a mirror back on you and shows you like all of your weaknesses.
Yeah.
And it's really hard and frustrating. There's a really big learning curve. So anyway, somewhere in between there, I was like, cool, I'm ready to start shooting some personal work again.
Mm-hmm.
And I got really excited about something that was like super simple. And I was like, I'm gonna buy these lights, and I'm gonna do these like low light end of day portraits on my roof in
Yep.
Brooklyn, so I could have some like open kind of like air behind them,
Yeah.
and just like get really simplistic and just shoot really beautifully like contoured low light portraits. And like I'd spend like a decent amount of money on like a couple of kind of like really flexible these RGB lights, and then it was like locked down, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, I bet people would still be into it. I'm gonna be 6 feet away from them, and then it just again slowly sets in. You're like, oh, this is like shelved. I can't do any of this.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have anything to work on. But what I decided to do was take two video projects, actually kind of three video projects that I had not finished yet.
Yeah.
And one of them was actually never kind of intended to finish. It was almost like it was this thing that I did with these kids who ride bicycles from Harlem. I'm not sure if you saw it, but it's these kids like to just do wheelies all over the city. It's actually like a bike culture that exists like in all over the world. But I found these kids, and I got together with my friend Santiago, who's a DP, and I'm like, let's go mess around and test a new camera. And so we did that with not really the intention to cut it up and make a fully formed video piece. But
Yeah.
when I was there and I did it, I sat down with these guys and did some interviews. And then when it came to the lockdown, I was like, well, why don't I just like see what I can make of this thing?
Yep.
And so I did that, and involved a sound designer, because we didn't record any sound whatsoever on the day of the shoot. And so I
Whoops.
think that's one of the cool aspects of that video is like 110% of the sound is made from like a library of image or library of sounds from a sound designer that I work with.
Damn,
And
that's sick.
And then he went out and like recorded, like, he's like, cool, I have everything except like bike, like chain pedaling sound. So he went out and like recorded that like wherever he lives. And then we composed some like original music for it. And then I took the VO and we put it over it. And it's like one of those things that kind of snuck up on you, where I never had any intention to do this piece of video, but I had all the time in the world. And I felt like the reaction to it was really great, because it was again like another stamp of approval on something that was like, I mean, you talk about real. There's
Mhm.
nothing more real than like these kids just flying through New York City streets, and like Santiago's hanging off the back of a motorcycle filming them. And like he set up this camera almost to be kind of like the same formation as a Super 8. So you just kind of hold it like a trigger.
Yeah.
And I brought a skateboard with some soft wheels, and I was like flying through Times Square, like dodging all these cars with them. And I was filming too. And I was glad to see that people reacted to it and kind of like felt the energy.
Yeah.
And then I finished up a couple other video projects, or actually finished up one other one. And then I'm now kind of finally getting to that third one. So the lockdown kind of gave me an opportunity to like sit down and really go, we're finishing these two things, and here's my like personal deadline. So it ended up being a really productive time up until like maybe like May or something.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, because I was looking at one project you did. I don't know when you shot it, but it's on your website, and I'll link it so people can go check it out. But it was called West Texas, and it was a really cool, like this kind of montage, this kind of imagery in West Texas. And I was surprised. I saw the credits. Heath Kirchart shot the 8mm footage of it. But what was that project all about?
That was like the culmination of, you know how in our industry everyone's been going like, well, video is going to be really important, you need to have video work.
Yeah,
So that conversation was like years in the past now. So like what
yeah,
ended up happening was my agent was like, people are asking for video work, and I was up for this pretty big job. It was big to me at the time.
mm-hmm.
And I knew there was a video component, and eventually the art buyer from the agency told my agent, they're like, really, Jeff doesn't have enough video work, and so I just want to give you a heads up, you're most likely they're going to award the job to someone else.
Yeah,
And so to me, I was like, that's never happening again, fuck that. And so I went back to New York and I put together a piece of video, and I just kind of I concepted something super simple. This girl listening to music on like high-end headphones, like going through the city. And it was like a really good exercise in like how I could like concept a small piece of video, execute it, edit it, color grade it, blah, blah, blah. And so then that kind of continued on. And I was like, what I've always wanted to make is like a really beautiful gritty project, like in the open West. And so like I'm a really like big fan of like West Texas and
mm-hmm.
like southern New Mexico and Arizona and places like that. And so eventually I just said, screw it, I'm gonna go for this. And so I asked a few people. I think what it was is I asked Santiago, I called him and I was like, hey, I want to do this project. What should I shoot it on? And he's like, you're like the third director to call me about not hiring me, but telling me for me to give you advice on what camera to use.
Yep.
And I was like, well, if you want to come and do this thing, I mean, that's cool, but it's like, it's a bit of a stretch. And he's like, I'm down.
Yeah.
And that kind of cascaded into this thing where I realized that people are available and interested in working on projects that are personal projects if they feel like it's a chance to do something kind of original. And so long story short is like I put my money where my mouth is, and I went to Los Angeles, I cast it, I partnered up with a wardrobe stylist in LA, and she chose all this wardrobe and FedExed it to El Paso. I flew the cast to El Paso.
Damn.
And like a few things I've done in the past, I'll call up Heath and I'll be like, hey, are you doing anything? Do you want to just like help me try to pull this thing off? And he's always such a good sport about it. So him and I drove out from LA, and he just kind of like helped me do all the loose ends. And he really likes shooting Super 8. And so he brought his Super 8 camera and film, and we kind of folded that in with the Alexa footage that Santiago shot. And then we brought it back to New York, and we did it on like no team. Like Santiago pulled his own focus. We had my friend Jason O'Neill who shot some stills and then basically acted as Santiago's AC.
Mm.
And that's it. So we did it on with like no team, and it's one of my favorite projects to date. But when we brought it back to New York, we handed it off and partnered with like really, really talented people to like take
Edit.
the production level as high as we could go.
Yeah, this kind of shows you like, because I remember, yeah, like you said, everyone in the photo industry was like, yeah, I got to start doing video. And there's like all these people shooting with like DSLRs, which is great. You can make good stuff with it, but it wasn't really like motion. It was basically like still photos that the camera was just running. But like, yeah, you feel like if you want to have that like top tier quality to the stuff you're doing, you can't really do it by yourself. Even though it was a small team, you still needed that team to make a production look a certain way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of proven to myself that I can make stuff that I love with really expensive tools
Mm-hmm.
and also with less expensive tools. But there's definitely like an aesthetic that I realize that I like about working with Santiago and shooting on an Alexa.
Yep.
Like I looked at the file and I was like, yes, that looks amazing. I understand why people, shoot on these things. And I'm still kind of getting to know the things that make up the kind of like look and feel that I like. Um, but yeah, I definitely wasn't interested in kind of like making it happen with like a 5D or something like that. I wanted to kind of like um, trust the expertise of the people that I knew that knew what kind of things I liked and the way they looked, and that they knew that I would get that look by using, certain materials and, using certain types of light and things like that. I mean, most of what we're doing is shooting with available light.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, every time we've worked on a video project, I feel like we take 10 steps forward because there's such a massive amount to learn about how you're going to execute the things you like about your still photography and then make that happen in a video format.
And also just kind of figure out how your approach to directing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a lot more components to that, especially when there's like moving parts and there's if you're doing sound and you're directing talent, it's a lot more moving parts than just shooting like a really nice portrait.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of, I would say if I had to take a wild guess, I'd say it's pretty typical for still photographers to be like, yeah, I can direct. And then you go and you work on something and you realize you don't know shit.
Yeah.
And like, if you want to be, I mean, I am always so curious about the people that are able to kind of like carry that type of confidence into a craft that they don't know anything about,
Yep.
which is kind of I mean, it's admirable, but at the same time, I think you need to be a little bit more humble if you're going to want to walk into an art form that people spend years and years and years and years crafting.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a lot. It's easier for photographers to go in and kind of make like montage type of formats, which I
Mm-hmm.
actually really enjoy, even from like really, really skilled directors and DPs. That's a format that's used and done well.
Yep.
But I think that it takes a lot more pre-production work and crafting on the front end to make something that resembles work that you really admire. You just didn't realize it at first how much work it took to get there.
Yeah, definitely. Like the last year and a half, 2 years, I started just kind of working a little bit on the side, just as like a grip for my buddy who has a company down in Rhode Island, and we've been doing some cool stuff. Like we just shot a whole TV show for HGTV, and done like some stuff for Hasbro. But like you said, because most of my experience was just being a still photographer myself, coming up as an assistant. But then once you get into like the real like crew of like dudes that are only kind of do like motion work, it's like a whole different like shorthand. It's just a lot more organized too. I found it's like, this is your role, this is your role, don't step on my fucking side, which I kind of actually liked. It was just like, it was almost more professional in a sense, you know what I mean?
It's done for efficiency
Yeah.
because the amount of work that needs to be accomplished on a video set dwarfs what is accomplished on a still set.
Yep.
So in order to do that, you have to divide and conquer,
Yeah.
and then you bring in these specialists. Now, I will admit, like, so I hired gaffers and grips on a lot of my still photography jobs, like
Smart.
almost all the time now.
Smart.
And every once in a while, I'll work with someone who doesn't work a lot on still shoots, and you'd be like, oh yeah, I forgot, like you're a gaffer or a grip, and you guys don't add apple boxes to your order because art department brings those when you guys work in film.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well. And then if you ask like, oh, can we get an apple box? You get this long answer about how it's not their department. And you're just like, come on, man. Like,
Yeah.
so still photography has like a real kind of like team player mentality, which I love.
Yep.
And like, we're all here. Let's just do what needs to get done to get the result we need, which
True.
I can respect that flexibility.
Definitely.
So I have found some people that will kind of like, that will stand on both sides of that. And then when we work on something that's like full blown video project, like I did a project that I finished up last year called Praise the Caterpillar. And that's just like only video, like top tier gaffer, like Santiago brought in like his A team, and there's like a completely different workflow. And I absolutely love that. Like I'm addicted to it like a drug, to be in that position and to direct on that type of level with that type of team. So I'm looking forward to, doing more of it.
No, it's dope, man. And I guess like what's kind of got you excited about photography right now? Like obviously you've been doing this for a while. Is there anything like in particular that kind of interests you, or kind of anything like you're hoping to work on or anything, or what's kind of got the spark for Jeff right now?
What's got the spark for me is that like, so I got to work on something recently where we did like a full rebranding of a company, and I think it's going to be out soon. In fact, it's for Dollar Shave Club. I can say that I think because they have one of my images on like their
Okay.
landing page.
Yep.
But they were totally behind the idea of like making moody and like just kind of like dirty imagery. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, cool, I can't wait to share some of this work so we can garner more of this work.
Mm-hmm.
So that excites me. To shoot and kind of embrace like messiness. It's like everybody's been asking us to make more kind of like real imagery for the past several years.
Yeah.
A lot of times what happens is like, well, then through casting and wardrobe and propping, like all the dirt gets scrubbed off.
Yeah,
And
because
you're like,
you go to the same modeling agency where it's the same models and they all look perfect. It's like all these people look like models because they are models.
right. I mean, there's a little bit of that. I mean, we go through like great lengths to cast and not get like the quintessential model look.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, wardrobe is huge.
Yeah.
Someone comes out of the trailer with like crispy jeans and brand new shoes. I think I always use this example, but you're just like, that's not what we're going for. And so the hope is that I'm excited about like slowly kind of folding more of this into jobs and showing clients like how we get there.
Yeah.
Because it's actually not so linear. For like you or I, like we might have like a linear kind of like thought process on how we're going to get to that spot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all education, and our clients need to educate us on like what they're looking for, and then we educate them back on like how we're going to try to get there.
Yep.
But it takes a while, but slowly building. Like I've had a quote unquote team, like, hey Jeff, do you have a team we can work with? Everybody like asks you that. He's like, the answer is always yes. But the real answer is that you're always like morphing that team to get you like closer and closer to that like that ideal situation.
Yep.
And so like right now, I'm really like obsessed with like propping and like set design,
Okay.
because I feel like to get like kind of like what I've realized is like people that work on movies, they're like the Zen masters of this stuff where like the room looks kind of dirty. Let's say it's a teenager, like a teenager's room is going to look kind of messed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, like a typical prop set might like buy all these props that are like, oh, we have a basketball, and we have a thing, and then we have a picture on the wall. And you're like, no, I want it to be kind of like fucked up a little bit, So like getting closer and closer to that. And we've worked with the prop stylist recently that's kind of nailing that front for me. And it's exciting to get like steps and steps closer to doing that. On like a separate note, I have like a personal product that I already shot that I'm kind of waiting for this one that I'm finishing right now to finish, and then I'm going to step back into this next one.
Yeah.
And it's making something kind of like interesting and kind of original in like a vertical phone format.
Okay.
And so I went on a skate tour with Toy Machine. It's now been quite a while since we did it, but I only brought a phone and I filmed everything vertically so that I could make a vertical edit. And the whole idea is to kind of like have like a POV thing of like the viewer is like maybe the person that's holding the phone. And so like it's kind of unusual. We're gonna have to kind of find our voice, but I'm excited to get creative with like different things like screen recordings and mixing video and photography and making these videos where we kind of like showcase how people use the phone and make it interesting. And the way we're gonna kind of make that really interesting is giving them an insight into like what it's like to sit in a 15 passenger van with like a bunch of professional skateboarders.
That is interesting. And since it's vertical video, is that something you think will just live like you'll post it on like your Instagram, like IGTV? Because it is interesting. Like when even myself, I think about this, like when I post photos on my Instagram, which is basically like, I mean, a lot of photographers, it's basically like your portfolio nowadays. And I really don't really post like landscape style photos because they become too small to actually even see. So I almost just post like vertical pictures. Then that's basically the only way I approach it now. You know, it's just kind of interesting how you think about taking a picture to where it's gonna live.
Yeah, so 100%. It's like we were on a video like portfolio showing with an ad agency one day, myself and my agent.
Yeah.
And my agency started this program last spring, and it's a mentorship program for it's not young as an age, but like younger in your career photographers,
Yep.
basically non-white photographers, and to give them a basically like a mentorship program where it's like they learn about like
The business.
promotion, accounting, and then each one of them had experiences with photographers on the roster. We talked them through some like editing and personal products and all kinds of stuff. And I can't wait for it to like keep going. We've actually finished the first version of that, and we're going to do it again. And then one of
Is
the
that
parts
is
I'm
that like is that like something like people apply for, or they just reach out to your agent, or how does the process actually work if someone listening would like to like be a part of that? I
Yeah,
guess
no,
like
I'm actually glad. We should take a second to go over this because I think it's super important.
yeah.
One of the things that you'll notice if you're really paying attention in photography is there's like, it's really swayed in certain directions. And not just the obvious ones like, oh, white men are hold a lot of the positions of shooting photographers in the industry, but like, the difference of experiences of women, and, gay and lesbian people, and like how these scales are tipped, right? And one of the things that it's really easy to admit if you're a white photographer is just like, yeah, there's not enough people of color for younger photographers to look up to and potentially even email them and say, hey, how did you get where you are? And did you encounter any type of like barriers that are specific to, not being this kind of privileged white photographer who is able to kind of like make their way into the industry? So my agency started this program. It feels like it's the whole agency, but it's kind of spearheaded by Kelly Montez, who is the owner of Apostrophe and the kind of like head rep, and then Darnell Scott, who's our visual designer, who's this like the perfect guy if you want to like tap into like what frequency people are using right now as far as like what's interesting culturally, what's good artistically, and he just kind of makes your work always look 10 times better from his kind of like visual standpoint.
Yeah.
So anyway, the two of them came up with this program. We promoted it through all the channels of all the photographers, and it was an application process. So all these photographers submitted portfolios, and it was really about choosing photographers that weren't just like, hey, I'm interested in photography. It's like, no, they like have a portfolio. The portfolio is in migration, but they're on that path, and then accepting them, and then coming up with like an extremely kind of like detailed and thought out schedule of like week 1 is about this and week 2 is about this. And they had to work on a project that would eventually be published in what we call the AMP magazine, Apostrophe Mentorship Program.
Yep.
And then us as photographers, we worked with 2 of the mentees throughout that process and gave them feedback and talked about questions they had, helped them edit their particular project. And then yeah, it was awesome. I mean, it's one of the most important things that we can do right now is make sure that we give I've always been interested in giving the answers to younger photographers. I
Definitely.
think you and I even talked about this one time. It's just like I can't wait to share the secrets with younger people and be like, hey, you want to skip a couple steps and save like a bajillion dollars on an art education? Let's talk about how
Yeah.
you can get to where you want to be.
Yeah, definitely. Because like, yeah, there's like two ways to look at it. Look at it like offense or defensive. Either like people are defensive and they're like, I'm not telling you shit. I'm not telling you who I work for or none of that. Or you can just be offensive and like this help everybody. And I think that's just a better way to go about it. Like there's enough jobs out there you can find work. And I mean, if people are gonna put the work in, they'll get it. Like they can go get it. I'm not worried about someone taking my job, because there's only so many hours in the day that I can go after this client or this client. There's other avenues for people to go down.
Isn't it so affirming when like I listened to your episodes with Art Streiber
Yep.
and you're just like, oh my God, is this guy like, I just love hearing him talk about the process. I love hearing him like having faith in the fact that he can share tons of information and not feel threatened because he's confident in his skill set and he's confident in the fact that I'm sure that like his clients love working with him. He's like so professional and he's extremely talented, but he's a great example of just like, share the info, man. There's enough out there. And that's not to say that when you're up for a job and you don't get it and you
Mm.
find out who you bid against and you end
Yep.
up seeing that work out in the real world, you're like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
wish I got that job.
That's
But
yeah.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, if you're like triple bidding on ad jobs, you should like if you win 1/3 of them, you're a
That's
it's
called
a, it's a winning batting average right there. You can go into the Hall of Fame with 333.
definitely, man. That's yeah, for sure. That's a good yeah, it's his motivation and it's competition. I think it's good. Like it pushes me like getting to see what like my friend Jesse Burke does or like what you're doing. It's like, all right, man, I need to step up my game. I need to go shoot more personal work and just keep it moving. And it's just like it's like fuel.
I actually feel like it's a really relevant part of the process of having a career in the arts is to have a group of people that work in your industry that you can talk to and you guys can kind of consistently share and just kind of like round robin questions about things that are happening. I mean, during the pandemic, I was actually I got an email like maybe like a year and a half ago from this photographer Jacob Pritchard, and he's like, hey, I listened to your episode on Alex's podcast. Do you want to come have dinner with us? We get together with some photographers.
Yeah.
And it kind of brought me into the fold of this group of photographers. And it was a lot of fun just listening to people talk about their work and just being around like-minded people and like maybe sharing some of your like woes about like, the frustrations of the industry sometimes.
Yeah, that's more of anything. Just the frustrations, especially this year more than ever. It's like, dude, what the fuck? Am I the only one not working? Like, how are you actually marketing your stuff since you can't even meet with people in person anymore? Like, what are you doing? Like, I just felt like lost. So it's like I have had those conversations, and it's like, all right, I'm not fucking up. Everyone's fucking struggling right now. So it's like, all right, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and brick by brick, hopefully, you can keep this train moving.
I think most photographers, when it comes down to it, they want to talk about it and they're glad to share.
Mm-hmm.
And so during the pandemic, we started doing these Zoom calls with that same group instead of meeting for dinner.
Yep.
And I wasn't able to join in a lot of them because I was just like juggling a child, and
Yeah.
and my wife was then now working at home, like she works in healthcare, and so she was like trying to work and
Yep.
keep this child who's still breastfeeding like at an arm's length.
A lot.
So I found it really helpful. We would talk about like who's gone on set, what's
Yep.
it like, did you feel safe, yeah, just like what to expect. Like it was really like for the first time ever, there was like no precedent for how this was going to go forward.
Yeah, no one knows. It was like
And so
even the clients you're talking to, like they be coming to you like, so how are you and your team gonna handle this? And it's like, however you want me to handle it. It's like trying to figure it out.
yeah, and you know what? And that's when it all comes down to like the team effort. It's just like then you talk to your tech and they're like, hey, I've worked on a couple jobs.
yeah,
We've already done this thing where we do screen sharing
yeah,
and learning how your client is going to approve images on shoots right now. is a new thing. And it turns out it's actually not that hard.
Yep.
I mean, there's a few different ways to do it, but we had to share information. And I think that photographers really want to do this. So kind of like to circle back, we're doing this program, and I actually called my agent and I was like, hey, I want to start bringing younger photographers onto my sets, so that they can just work with us and learn by doing, because that's how I learned about photography. I did not go to photo school. I learned by being an assistant.
Yep.
And so we're going to try to fold that into the kind of like the next phase of the mentorship program, is just to be like, cool, you're going to come to work, you're going to get paid, and now you're really going to learn.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that I do find with younger photographers is almost like they don't know what they don't know.
Yep.
So they're like, yeah, people are like telling them my photos are great. And you're like, that's really cool. There's a whole other side to this, which is like showing up on the day of a photo shoot and executing that skill that you did in your personal days.
Yep.
In a single day within these parameters. And I need you to execute it 10 times in one day.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, yeah, you can have the greatest portfolio in the world and they're great pictures, but if you don't have a proven track record of being able to put productions together, that no one's going to want to take a chance with you. And that's the hardest thing in photography, is like getting that chance. And it's frustrating to kind of get from like the editorial chance to, maybe getting your first cover, and then get into the advertising thing. Cause it's still like baby steps. It's like, they're going to let you shoot like, maybe like I think some of my first advertising jobs was just like, I wasn't shooting a campaign, I was just piggybacking like on a video shoot, and it was just like, it wasn't a ton of money, but it wasn't like a big chance for the agency, because it wasn't like a huge billboard campaign or anything. But yeah, it's like you really gotta prove yourself, and it never ends really.
The one thing that's a good example, because the one thing that I tell people when they're starting out is like, there's jobs of all different types of tiers.
Yep.
There's like full blown global campaign. They're looking at the top tier, right? But those agencies have needs that are like all the way down to like the bottom. And they're like, we need someone just to go and like pick up whatever imagery that you can get on this video shoot.
Yep.
And you can only have one assistant. And so the good thing is like, that's I think, and maybe there's a different point of view to this, I think that's a good thing, because it's actually like the first step of the staircase that's like perfect jobs for younger photographers.
Yep.
And like, I haven't done one in a little while, but I worked on video shoots where we're the stills team, and I actually love it. Because sometimes we get to go in and work with the grip and electric and gaff team and get to know them. And some of those guys are like, men and women that are like super talented. And if you get to know them really well, you get to, like, I always sell, I'm like, we're not going to bring in our own light. We're going to work within the existing light that the set has.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to kind of augment it a little bit. And so those are really fun jobs. But kind of like, again, to go back, is like the first jobs I shot were like a really, really, really simple low end lookbook.
Yeah.
Where like the creative director of anthropology was like, hey, like, Jeff's working his way up, like, let's throw this kid a bone. And it was like in a hotel room against a V flat. I don't know if I told you the story before, but it's like the floor was wood. So I got home and like all the images had like a warm gradient coming off of the bottom of the floor. And I was like, damn it. And so they're great like practice sessions, and like those jobs, those little tiers are perfect ways for younger photographers to like shake some of the dust off, like work out some of the kinks, like understand like what you're capable on in a single day, file delivery, what mistakes you made, and what you did well. And then I think one of the things I was going to kind of mention that's like interesting to photographers that are starting out is like your portfolio before you start shooting commercials, almost like a band's first album.
Yep.
It's like they've been writing that album since they were like 13, and they took 4 years to record it. And then your first commercial job is like your second album, where the record company's like, cool, now just do all that in 6 months.
Yeah.
And so when you show up to a real photo shoot, you're just like, well, I need to do, like, my portfolio is made up of pictures I've taken for like 7 years or something like that. And they're like, all right, so just make us the same quality imagery of that same uniqueness and do it in a single day. And
Yeah.
so that's where it becomes like a different story. And that's where you end up kind of like learning how to be you in like a different environment.
No, definitely. And one of the things that I've done that's kind of helped me, because like when, as you know, when you're first starting out and no one knows who you are, like these art directors, these art producers, what I would do, I went to some of the local agencies in Boston. I was like, hey, I know you guys aren't gonna hire me for any big campaign, but if you guys need help putting pitches together, because all these, as you know, ad agencies are trying to find new clients the same way you are, and they're trying to put pitches together for whatever it may be, like Starbucks or maybe it's McDonald's or Nike or whatever. So I would kind of do like these little mock shoots that they would use to like present to the client, and that's kind of, and I ended up like building the relationships with art directors that ended up turning into like real jobs and stuff like that. And that's like one thing I kind of did starting out.
I think, first of all, I've never heard of someone doing that. And I think that's a really smart idea.
Yep.
I think there's like probably like 1,000,001 different ways of like how you can kind of do something for no, I don't want to say no pay, but
Yeah.
I'll be brutally honest. It's like I started assisting and I just said, I don't know anything. I'll just work for free until I learn.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of gone, and it may be a good thing and it may be a bad thing. I think you could like argue it on both sides. Like I would never have someone come and work for free for me now,
Yeah.
because I think everyone kind of deserves to get paid at least like a living kind of
I
like, I don't
still
know.
no, I still got paid on those jobs, but it was only like maybe like $1,000, $1,500 or something like that. It wasn't free, but it wasn't like a full-on campaign or something.
Oh yeah, no, I assume that you had some sort of like pay agreement with them and you were working kind of like
Yeah.
on an entry level kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
budget that they felt fit. But there's like I remember like after we did the podcast last time, I was like, I realized that I'm always kind of speaking to a young person. I'm like speaking to me when I moved to New York City.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I have so many questions. Will someone please answer my questions? And I really like the idea of finding someone who's legitimately enthusiastic about being a photographer.
Yeah, man.
Because I'm sure you encountered a lot of people, but people are like, I want to be a photographer. And you're like, do you really want to be a
Yeah.
photographer? Because you're like, I can't tell if you just like taking pictures or if you really want to like strap in and like grind this shit out for the next 10 years and become a commercial photographer.
Yeah.
And so when you realize someone's like that, and that they really want to do it, I'm really excited about sharing that information with people.
Yep.
And so like your example is a really good one. Like I never really kind of thought about like, I didn't know that ad agencies needed content to pitch
Yeah, client, new
brands.
new business. Yeah.
And that's a really good way for you guys just to have a conversation and get to know each other too.
Yeah. Yeah, because like
I
starting
mean,
out, I knew I wasn't stupid. Like I didn't have any like campaigns that I shot for Nike or any of these commercial clients. I had none of that in my book, and I knew they would never hire me because it's just the stakes are too high. So I was like, how the fuck am I gonna get in the door to actually get anything? So that was just kind of my approach, and it's like, yeah, I think you just have to have a lot of patience, and it's like, yeah, you gotta have obviously you gotta have goals. Like I still got tons of goals I want to hit, but it's like it's like the little wins. It's like the little wins. If I got to win this month and keep building on it and get another win, get another hit, back to the sports references. But yeah, get the average up.
I know I'm in it. I got to be honest, like even though we're right in the thick of it, I still and sometimes intimidated by the fact that it is like there's just like no guarantees. Like the amount of times that you need to kind of like touch a single person for you to develop a relationship for them to eventually potentially hire you
Yep.
can be really daunting.
Yeah.
And years ago, when like agency access first came out,
Mm-hmm.
it was actually kind of a pretty effective tool. Like your rate of someone engaging with your stuff was like decent, and it was like it made sense cost wise. But then obviously email campaigns became kind of so blown out that it's less effective now.
Yep.
But I remember meeting art buyers at ad agencies and saying like, something very typical. Be like, oh, thanks for taking the time to look at my book. And I remember a few art buyers would just be like, no need to thank me. This is my job. Like my job is to look at photography and to
See
know
what's
the
out there.
landscape of like who's out there doing things.
Yeah.
And to kind of go back to what we just said, it's like their job is probably to know photographers that fit into different budgets. So like, hey, we have this client that wants something super small. Maybe they're trying to win a client like your kind of access thing, and they're like, we can shoot this thing for a lower budget and show them we can make quality work and then maybe earn more work. I'm not, quite
No,
sure.
definitely. Yeah. Cause then you get that one chance and you take, so now you got some commercial work in your portfolio. And now
Right.
you can bring that, go to another agency that doesn't really know you. And then they can look at it and you have more like whatever, like quote unquote, like, I'm not street cred, but like you have experience. You got more commercial work in your book. And then it's just like building up, like you said. Yeah. But
I know, isn't it like it's almost like I don't even know if I have a metaphor for it, but it's like if you just have your portfolio laid out. Let's just say it's a series of 5x7s on a desk, and there's like
mm-hmm.
20. And when you would go shoot something, you'd be like, oh, I have two new pictures that are better. And
Yeah.
you would like take out two weak ones.
Yeah.
And so your portfolio was like constantly evolving.
Yeah.
I remember one of the things that I liked hearing when I was getting started was my friend, Jason Odell, who was shooting for a living. He was like, don't make your portfolio long if just for the sake of it being long. He's like, if you have 10 good photos, then just show 10.
Yeah.
And I thought that was good, just to kind of be like, all right, well, like these are the ones that I think are really well executed. And then like over time,
Mm-hmm.
you're like, cool, now I've shot something for this brand. And now I can kind of like, show that off and sub out some of the kind of like lower end stuff that I was shooting. And sometimes you're surprised that sometimes photos, have quite a long lifespan in your book because you kind of nailed it 10 years ago when you took this photo and you feel like it's still relevant.
Yeah.
But working your way up and like chipping away at it is basically like an endless process, right? I don't think it ends until you retire or die.
Yeah, pretty much. And one thing I was gonna ask you, because I know you mentioned it briefly, you said you were doing some like Zoom portfolio showings with your agent. Is that something you've been doing a lot of? Because that's like I haven't really done it, but I haven't really reached out to anybody, asked like an art producer to look at my book through Zoom, but it's something that I'm starting to think of more because I think it's still going to be a while before you can go like to New York and meet with somebody. But is that the Zoom portfolio showing something you guys been doing a lot of?
We have so I think so my agency kind of like approaches it in like, bursts. And so like a certain depends on like what kind of work you have to show or like that. I
Yep.
mean, I think that a lot of people were kind of following similar paths through like March, April, June. And it was like, okay, in the beginning, it was like, do you have any photograph or are you living with people that you can photograph in
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
house?
Yep.
Wasn't a huge fan of that. I was just like, my wife is tired, she's working, and I live in a New York apartment. It's
Yeah.
900 square feet. Like, we're gonna wait until we can, like, I was always thinking during that whole time, I was like, why wouldn't I just go outside and just shoot with a longer lens? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was like, let's send me to like the Delaware Water Gap and I'll shoot someone like trail running, and I won't even be anywhere near them, and we'll make great pictures.
Yeah.
Anyway, that never happened. Eventually, it kind of like formed into, can you show us what you're capable of with small teams, because they're only allowing groups of 10, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, we were creating these PDF portfolios of like what we were able to accomplish with a certain amount of people.
All
And
right.
that eventually migrated into having these meetings. And I actually think it's really good that not all this stuff is accomplished on a phone call anymore,
Yeah.
because you get to like see people, eye to eye. What you do is I would create a PDF portfolio and I would talk about, whatever you want to talk about that you think explains how you make work. And I would share my screen and I would walk them through it. And then we would like ask them, you know, inform us like what's been going on, like what are some hurdles that you're encountering with making commercial work in this environment. And they would ask some questions about like like you mentioned before, they were like, so how are you sharing the work with the clients that can't come to set? And
Yeah.
I think the Zoom meetings are like incredibly effective, and they're super convenient because like you just do it from where you're sitting,
Yep.
and it lasts from 30 minutes to wherever, maybe an hour sometimes. and you can really just kind of like sit down and rap with people and get to know like what they're up to. I mean, a lot of these meetings are so good because you're just like, just tell us what you're about. Like, what is your vibe? Like, what are you excited to, like, when you ask me, like, what are you excited to make?
Yeah.
Like, that's really what most of the conversation should be about. It's like, let's tap into like, what are you inspired? Like, what do you got in your back pocket for when the right time comes and there's the right job? Like, what are you good at? And I've like learned through some like really interesting agencies that actually don't just do like typical like art buying and commercial content. Like, they actually have like a hand in kind of creating campaigns and or maybe kind of like graphic, design for it or something like that. And so I was excited to learn and potentially find new people that I would collaborate and make work with.
Yeah. No, it's good to hear. I think it's something I got to start doing more of. I did one of those like pay to play. It was through the SPD, which is the Society of Publishers in Design, and they had like an online portfolio review, and it was cool. Like I met with like 54 people in like the span of 3 days. It was a ton of Zoom calls, but it was interesting. But I think I got to do more of this, that like reaching out to people and try to show my work through.
Did you find that particular like not avenue, but that like that company or that portfolio review to be helpful for you?
Yeah, it was cool. It actually did get some good feedback, like just on the layout of my website. There's some stuff I didn't even really think about, and it was good, and definitely made some contacts. And it was only like a month and a half ago, but I've already stayed in contact and hopeful to get some jobs from that. But it's like, yeah, it's doing anything you can to stay afloat in these times. But yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, like you said, it was just good to connect with someone, and you could tell like the editors were happy to like talk to a human being again because they all been stuck at their house for the last 8 months.
I mean, it's important to remember every once in a while that like a lot of the people that are involved in this industry are just like photo fans. They just
Exactly.
want to like sit down and like talk about photography and
Yep.
get excited about like what you're up to. So I mean, the pay to play ones are always like a wager, right? Like how much is it, and how much? Because obviously, if we all had limitless funds, then we would just like
Do all of them.
do all the expensive advertising, right?
Yeah.
But I used those. I went to a bunch of them in New York for quite a while.
Yeah,
And so
PhotoWorks is doing them right now. They just sent out an email. People can go check out. It's NYC PhotoWorks, and you can just do like if you only want to do one, they have like a running list, and it shows like who's available on that day. Like it might be some art buyer from this agency or whatever, and you can see if they're available. Click it, book it, and it's just like one like that.
yeah, that might actually be more efficient than the way it used to be, because when you went in person before, it was more like fill in your top choices and then they would kind of like let you know who you landed.
Yep.
And so obviously there's going to be some people that are way more popular, like they're maybe from like a very well-known ad agency or
Yeah.
like a publication that everybody wants to be in. And so I still saw the value in them because I mean, that's actually where I made my first contact with Apostrophe.
Oh, really?
My agent, yeah, and it was a slower process. It wasn't like, oh, I met with them and they like signed me on Monday.
Yep.
In fact, actually, that's a good story. Is like I did meet other agents in that forum that were very much like they were like exaggeration a little bit, but they're like, you're gonna be a star, kid. I'd love to have you on my roster. And I was like, yes, I made it.
Yeah.
Okay, job is done.
Yeah.
And
No.
then fucking crickets.
Yeah.
And I found that there was a lot to be said about people that were like, cool, we like your work. Let's keep on talking.
Yep.
And having a long conversation and kind of like understanding where the two of you, like what type of business you're interested in and like where they see your work growing. They want to see if you kind of have the grit to like, dig this whole thing out.
Yep.
And so I think that the reason why Apostrophe ended up being such a great fit for me is as they kind of like they like made me wait a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that time I went and shot a bunch of personal work and kind of like got the gears moving in the right direction and kind of didn't take anything for granted, like, oh, like I've shot for a couple like cool clients already. And sorry, my wife is like calling
No,
me.
you gotta take it.
No.
Okay.
Just joking. I'll call. I already talked to her just a little bit earlier. I'll talk to her again.
No worries.
Damn, it's still ringing.
No worries.
Yeah, so I thought those pay to play things were interesting. Like I think every time someone sits down with your book, like it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but it's
Hmm.
also like you're gonna get some good information. And sometimes people have no idea what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah, those are the ones that are great because they're like, it's like, yeah, I'm like, I actually don't even want to work with you because you seem like a jerk. I was like, you know what I mean? Not everybody, most 99% of the people I met were cool and I got good stuff, but there was other ones where I was like, yeah, this, thanks for letting me know I don't want to work with you anyways.
Dude, listen, there's like something to learn from like every single person you sit down with, and every single small or large job that you work on, you always learn something.
Yeah.
But I remember like having a woman look at my portfolio, and it's like one of these things where I would go to the guys who run NYC PhotoWorks, I think are really like just cool people.
Oh yeah,
And they,
Mark Asnan. That dude's a dope photographer in his own right.
yeah. And Josh, when they were kind of like getting NYC PhotoWorks going, he wanted people to be really, felt like it was worth the money. So he would
Yeah.
like walk back in the lobby and be like, "Hey, if anybody doesn't have a meeting right now, I have so and so who wants to sit down with someone." And you're like, "Cool, like I got a bunch of extra meetings." I think they became successful enough to where they
Need to
didn't
do
have to
that.
give away those meetings anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember sitting down with someone and she's like looking at my book, and it's like at the time it was, you know, probably a lot more of like younger, more kind of grittier stuff, like skaters and stuff. And she's like, "Do you shoot babies?" And I was like, "No." And if you hired me to shoot babies, you need to do way more homework and find people that shoot infants. I'm like, I could probably pull it off.
Yeah.
And in the end, like I actually have, like I remember I shot a casting for, like, this is when I first was coming up, and I shot a casting for Target, and there was babies. And I was like, "Oh, cool." There was like a baby wrangler and everything. It was like actually pretty fun because the babies are just like cooing and laughing and you're shooting them. But this woman to like look at my book and like make it sound like she was going to potentially look for me to shoot an infant for like a diaper campaign, I'm just like, that's silly.
Well, yeah. No, it is interesting. Yeah. I at first I was kind of like, I was like, it's kind of weird paying someone to look at your work, but then I was like, yeah, fuck it. I'll try it. And it was good.
I mean, in all honesty, though, you're paying them to get feedback, but at the same time, you're paying to basically cut through everyone's busy schedule and sit down with people that you would like to work with.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, that's the
And
job.
so you're kind of like paying to hit the fast forward button.
Yep. All right. Well, to wrap up, anybody's been following Jeff, I'll post his Instagram. You've been having some electric content on Instagram the last week in your quarantine. You've been watching a lot of movies. What are the top movies you've been watching the last week or so? Because you've watched a lot.
Yeah. So, like, I think last night I had this realization, and or yesterday I was like, wow, I'm really into this lifestyle of basically like I wake up. So here's how it works in this quarantine hotel. It's like half prison and like I don't know, half something else. But like at 7 o'clock, noon, and 6 p.m., they drop a bag of food by your door, they ring your doorbell, and then you have to go put on a mask and you go pick up the food and you bring it in. It's like someone opening up this, like in the Shawshank Redemption thing, and they slide the food
You know
tray in.
what? You know what they call that in prison, Jeff? They call that 3 hots and a cot.
So I have 3 hots, except they were not hot.
Okay.
And so I called the producer. So prior to coming here, I looked up YouTube videos of people in quarantine in Seoul, and people are like, "Oh, look at this meal. It's like really great variety." And like this guy had a microwave and he was like eating all this, not great food, but like plenty of it, and hot food.
Yep.
And none of it was hot. And the producer's been texting me, just making sure we're okay. Nicest person ever so far via text.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no hot food? And he was like, "Oh my God, that's horrible. Like, I feel so bad for you." So he like sent over these 2 massive boxes of food, and then had a microwave delivered, and had like condiments delivered, and like cold brew coffee and water and all this other stuff.
Yep.
So my realization yesterday was like, I wake up, I eat this breakfast, I like stretch a little bit, and I'm like, all right, what movie am I going to watch before lunch? So I watch a movie, and then I eat lunch. I get all excited when the doorbell rings, and I go get my lunch. And then I pretty much try to like nail 3 movies a day.
Wow, 3 movies a day. All right, damn, you're really getting after it. I like it.
I know, I'm actually really, it's almost like a photo shoot. The first half of the day, I'm kind of like feeling it out, and I only watch like one. And then like after dinner, so I've never been a person who's ever done yoga, but I do these like yoga videos on YouTube. So from like 4 until dinner time, I'm like doing some yoga.
All
And then
right.
after that, I take a shower, eat my dinner, and then I usually am able to bang out back-to-back movies before I go to bed.
That's awesome, man.
So movies that I'm really into right now. So people were recommending lots of stuff, and it's a good chance for you to go and see all the movies that you've always wanted to. And I think everybody's list is different. But I think when it comes to, if you're a photographer, to like dig into the people that are really known for excellent cinematography,
Yeah.
or just go to famous cinematographers and just watch everything they've made. I rewatched what is it called? The Murder of Jesse James by the Coward
Oh, the
Robert
assassination of Jesse James.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that movie was incredible.
I think that I maybe tried to watch it at home one time. You know, when you're just busy or maybe you're too tired, so you don't really like absorb a movie.
Yeah.
So I watched that and I was just like, holy shit. Like that was pretty amazing. And then I watched some like really famous movies and I was just like, I'm just not that into that. And I also made myself watch some movies that I know that are like widely respected that I just need to watch, even though I know they wouldn't really be my style.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2001 Space Odyssey. It's like Stanley Kubrick is like a wild genius. So I like need to know what these movies are all about and watch them. And that movie is just like, have you seen it?
Parts of it, and I haven't watched it start to finish though.
It's like, it's almost like they do such long takes to just see like they're fucking with you.
Yeah.
Like they're so long and you're just like, okay, we get it, guys. We like this shot. It's it's like we're 2.5 minutes into this shot. And a part of me kind of respects the kind of like the gutsiness of just like making something that you want it to be. So, and then I watched Ida last night. It's
Okay.
a Polish language film that I think won an Academy Award. It's really, really beautiful. Like it's maybe like the best like black and white photography like I've seen in a movie. And I'm excited to see the next movie he made called Cold War. So I'll watch that pretty soon too.
That's good, man.
Um, but I was trying to go like lowbrow, highbrow. So I was watching like 80s comedies and then like backing it up with like an Academy Award winner.
Get like some like Ace Ventura, Pet Detective shit or something in there, dude.
Well, I watched that movie probably 1,000 times. So I was like trying to tap into the things that like, so like as a teenager, I watched The Breakfast Club and Weird Science like 1,000 times,
Yep.
but I didn't watch Pretty in Pink or 16 Candles.
Okay.
So I made myself watch 16 Candles and I was just like, I don't think this movie is like everyone loves that movie, but I'm like, Ferris Bueller is unbelievable. 16
Yep.
Candles, I was like, maybe it just wasn't for me.
Yeah, I think you're not in the demographic anymore of that movie.
Yeah, and I can imagine being a teenage girl and just like thinking that was the shit. But at the same time, like I was talking to someone, I was like, I think if you like pass the window of like the 90s and you haven't watched them and you try to go back and watch them,
Yep.
they don't have the same like feel. But like back in the 90s, when I watched Weird Science, I thought it was like one of the greatest movies I'd ever seen.
Yeah, I just watched 1917 on TV the other night. That movie was sick by Sam Mendes and Roger Deakins,
Yeah.
and that because it made it all look like it was in one shot. I mean, I know it just came out last year, but I watched it. It was fucking incredible.
There's so what I like to do is I watch a movie and then I text Santiago Gonzalez what he thinks. And I make fun of him because he's like a bummer to talk to about movies because he has such really good critical information about the film that it kind of like takes away the veneer of you're just like walking out of the theater with a smile on your face.
Yep.
But a movie, see, that's lunch
Oh,
is here.
oh shit, lunch is here. Oh, I like this is action packed right here. You need to get your lunch.
See,
We're wrapping up anyways.
it's 35 minutes late, but that's cool. Like they make you wait for us. You really want it.
No worries.
And that movie in particular, he was like, yeah, some people kind of refer, and they're maybe he said it or someone else said it, that it was like cinematographer porn, where it's like it was so incredibly like extravagant and beautiful, like maybe at the expense of the story.
Yep.
And so when I watched the movie, I was just like, holy fucking shit, that was like insane. That was beautiful. That was
Well, you should
amazing.
go back and they got a behind the scenes thing you can probably find on YouTube. And they did rehearsals for like, I could be wrong, but it was something insane like 6 months or something more because they built all those like battle, like they're technically sets, but they're like outdoors and it's where like the fight scenes where the war would happen. And they like rehearsed that shit because they needed, yeah, because everything was like in one shot. So they needed to happen like precisely. And they rehearsed it and rehearsed it and rehearsed it, which like most movies don't get that much rehearsal.
I think that I know so little about making like films,
Mm-hmm.
but I like know just the tiniest a bit amount to know that that is like me building my own rocket and going to the moon.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
like so fucking crazy to like have the foresight to like build all that and like have the guts to request it. You're like, okay, cool. So we're gonna build this like $15 million set for like that's only going to be in this portion of the movie and like have the courage and the kind of confidence to like know you're going to pull it off and it's going to be like worth the dough.
Yeah.
But like if I was to like give any advice to someone, this is just advice that I got from someone else, but like I watched a movie and I didn't realize that Roger Deakins had shot it because I've never been a person who was like going through the credits and being like, who's the cinematographer, who's the blah blah blah, like who did this and who colored it. But now I'm realizing I'm like, oh, like I like everything that Roger Deakins has shot. Like, oh, I think every Terrence Malick film is worth sitting through because like you're gonna be inspired somewhere in between there. And
Yep.
so I watched a bunch of those and I was like, oh wow, like Badlands was amazing. And then he made another one several years later that I didn't think was as successful, but that one won an Academy Award for cinematography. And then you start to like see these actors like develop over time. And so this this hotel room is giving me the opportunity like that you just like gets completely taken out of your life when you have a kid. So just sit in a room and just completely binge eat cinema.
Yeah, like hopefully, yeah, because when else in your life, like hopefully this doesn't happen again, but like when would you ever have 14 days sitting in one time, literally never leaving the room, which is just so that's why I had to call you, man, because this is such a unique experience.
I mean,
Eh,
even just hearing you say that makes me like excited to like get back into it. The
dude.
only issue is like I came here with like a full computer set up to retouch,
Yep.
and I've been waiting for a client that we just shot something to kind of get back to us and give us
Now
the
I gotta
retouch.
get back to work.
So we're gonna get back to work and make some dough to like pay the bills and finish up a project that we were excited to work on.
Yeah.
But I'm obviously very reluctant that I'm gonna have to give up my like yeah.
This
I'm a
lazy.
really like I'm a really binge type person when it comes to like my vices and things like this. So being able to do this with movies has been like
No.
really fun.
Nah, well, I'm glad we got back on the phone, Jeff. Man, I always love talking to you, man. You're always just got like a upbeat, like positive vibe. So, man, it was a pleasure talking to you again, man. But yeah, man, for people listening, I'll have them go check out your work, and as well, I'll link them to your rep for that whole like mentorship program for anybody listening. For
Absolutely. Like spread the word on that because we're gonna continue to do it. And the whole idea is that it just like slowly kind of like folds more people into the industry through lots of different ways. And then,
Yep.
we'll be looking for people to kind of like pull onto our sets and give them the real experience as well. So I'm not sure when that's going to kind of get launched, but I think they're already kind of setting things up to do like the second wave of the mentorship program in the new
All right.
year.
Cool, man. I might have a couple guys that might throw your way and to give you some names and stuff if that's all right.
Do it, do it, do it. And at the end of the day, regardless of like a mentorship program,
Yep.
I always tell people, I'm like, if you're trying to break into this thing and you have questions, just email me.
Yeah, man.
And a lot of times I'm like, email me, but like, let's just talk on the phone and then I can just rapid fire your answers in
Yeah.
like 30 minutes and hopefully give you a chance to like, skip a few steps and get closer to being a photographer.
Right on. All right, Jeff. Well, I'll let you get back to it. I know you got retouching to do, and hopefully maybe sneak in a couple more movies in there. But good luck on your shoot out there, man.
Last thing I want to say is I really dug your Cuba project.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's a work in progress. I'm hoping I was supposed to go back there in October to shoot more of the skaters because I became friends with some of the guys. But then obviously everything got shut down. But my goal is to go back down there and make the whole project like about the skaters, like photograph them in their houses and skating, and there's more of that. Right now it's kind of mixed mosh, but yeah, I appreciate it. It was
I
an incredible.
felt like it was like a good, like I could tell that it was a blend of like your photo style
Yep.
with like your expertise and like knowing what's the real deal in skating.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was good to get back. I haven't really shot skating in a long time. And but yeah, man, Cuba. Anytime if you ever get the chance, man, fucking go down there. It's fucking incredible.
I know. I've heard. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing the next iterations of the project. And thanks for having me on.
All right, later, Jeff.
See ya.
Peace. So there you have it. That was the Jeff Vallee interview. Hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. Like I said, big fan of Jeff's work, and just have a lot of respect for his hard work and just his kind of outlook on photography. And there's always a real positive dude. So can't thank him enough. Definitely go check out Jeff's website at jeffvallee.com, as well as his Instagram at Jeff Vallee. And if you're interested in the mentorship program for emerging Black and Indigenous people of color, for photographers looking to pursue a career in commercial photography, feel free to reach out to Jeff or his rep, apostrophereps.com. I'll put the link in the descriptions, but they got a lot of information on their website and whatnot, so definitely go check that out. And as always, I'll be having weekly podcasts every week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as the Photo Banter YouTube page. So definitely go give us a subscribe over on the YouTube page. I'd much appreciate it. And as always, thanks so much for listening, and take care.